Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have the ISFJ live Q&A, and I have Roger. He is the admin of ISFJ Haven on Facebook. And yeah, would you like to tell us a bit about you?
Sure. I've been studying MBTI for quite a few years already. Just really like the topic of MBTI. Started getting into Enneagram a little bit too a few years back. But yeah, just really excited to answer any kind of questions anyone has.
That's great to hear, Roger. And so my first question for you is, how do you experience your dominant function, introverted sensing, SI?
So with SI, it's such an interesting thing. It's the first function that I have. It's the dominant function. It's something that I don't necessarily feel like I have a lot of control over. It's just something that is just automatic, and almost everything that ends up happening has to do with going to the past or remembering things of what happened before. If I'm looking off into the distance, or I see something like maybe like an apple or something like that, then I start thinking about everything that I remember about an apple. I'll remember like, oh right, yeah, I remember apple, like Isaac Newton, gravity, right? I remember learning about that in school, right? School, I remember that. Where was I? I was like in high school, and just keep going from there. High school, right? That's where I met a lot of my good friends. That's where I went swimming. So it just kind of goes on and on. Just start remembering thing by thing, little by little. But SI just has to do with really enjoying those kind of details, looking to the past experiences, kind of being a little bit grounded into the real world and everything.
Yeah, when you're looking at something, you're also looking at the things that it reminds you of from the past. That's a really great way of putting it, Roger. And Carl Jung, he calls the perceiving functions irrational functions. And the reason for that is because you can't really control what you perceive sometimes. The perception just happens. Whereas Carl Jung calls the judging functions the rational functions because there is some conscious judging that you put into it. So cool stuff. Plus, it being your dominant function, it's also even more unconscious and it just happens to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, Roger, how do you experience extroverted feeling, FE?
Extroverted feeling, from what I understand, has everything to do with kind of keeping that harmony within my environment. So kind of sticking to what social norms are, making sure that everyone is feeling okay. It's always, everything has to do with external. So it's not about how I feel about things, it's about how everybody else feels, making sure that everyone is okay, everyone's feeling okay, and making sure that that everyone is just feeling okay in the moment that I'm in with them.
Yeah, it's making sure that everyone is not being kind of like upset or offended at something someone said. So it's being able to kind of upkeep the good vibes almost of the group and almost upkeep people's comfort levels, especially when it's paired with SI. It's going to be looking at people's comfort levels, like how are you doing? Are you feeling okay? And making sure people feel good and that the phrases you say land well with other people. And so FE is very good at knowing what not to say sometimes. And with introverted thinking, TI, how do you experience that, Roger?
Yeah, that one is interesting. That one I feel like I'm still trying to understand it even to this day. But all I know for TI is just whenever I get into that kind of grip with SI and TI. So if I start feeling terrible, if I'm not doing really good, I start analyzing the past. So I start overthinking about everything that I've done. I start thinking like, what could I have done differently? What does this mean, or what do I make sense of this one thing that happened in the past, and how what I even kind of like going over all the mistakes that I made or the things that I've done wrong, just super analytical and hyper focused on just trying to analyze and overthink everything. So it's a difficult function for me to kind of understand it too, but at least from what I understand, it's just really attributed to trying to make those connections and categorizing things a little bit.
Absolutely. Really well put. And this is the part of you that kind of likes over intellectualizing things, maybe understanding it and putting it into a framework. And so, Roger, how do you experience extroverted intuition, NE?
This one is interesting because this one I felt like I've had a little bit more experience with. For whatever reason, most of my friends have that higher dominant NE. So I've actually kind of been able to understand it a little bit better. But for us, what I understand is that when we are by ourselves, when we're not doing so great and we're forced to utilize that extrovert intuition, it's always about negative possibilities. It's always about what could go wrong, what's the next bad thing that's going to happen, what could possibly happen to me or to someone I love right now. It's always just focused on the negative. But it's fascinating for me that, at least for me, I'm not sure for maybe other ISFJs, but whenever I'm paired up with a close friend of mine that has that extroverted intuition, it helps me not focus so much on the negativity. They're able to kind of bring this more positivity to NE and kind of help me expand my mind a little bit. So yeah, it's interesting how different people can bring up different aspects of that function for me. But if I'm by myself, it's definitely just looking at all the worst possible scenarios that could possibly happen.
Ooh, dang. Ooh. When you have the NPs, they can bring that NE optimism to your life as well. Cool. And so Ron asks, how do you experience TE polar?
For TE polar, that one I'm not too sure. So just in general of TE?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This one is interesting too. One of my best friends, he's an ESTJ, so I've had a huge part of my life with a TE. But I know that generally speaking, TE I've seen it as very commanding, dominating, and extremely insensitive. So it's always been difficult for me to kind of appreciate and like that TE, just because I feel like TE just tramples over everybody else. It's like, no, it's my way, the highway. Like, this is the way that's the best way to do it. This is the best thing to do. And it doesn't leave a lot of room for any kind of emotions or room for any other kind of opinions of other people. But yeah, I guess how I experience TE, I'm not sure if I have an example of that, but I know that at least from other people, I have experienced TE from other people.
Yeah. In comment to TE polar, I find all the introverts have a little bit of TE polar, unless they're a TJ type that's an introvert. Like, I've had INFPs and ISFPs have pretty bad TE because it's TE in their inferior slot. And there's also INTPs. Sometimes they have such high NE and low SE that it can look like they have TE polar as well. And so a couple of the introverted types besides the TE polars struggle with TE too, so it's hard to differentiate in that area sometimes, and it gets into murky waters. The experience of TE polar is that there's some counter values to TE that make it hard to do that while you're using FE. So when you're caring about people's feelings and how things will land and sugarcoating things and saying things too subtly, sometimes you can kind of make things less efficient that way because you're kind of too kind that people are a little slower to do things. So that's one of the ways that TE polar happens. And like during the filmings of these videos, I have TE users offering me, hey, Joyce, I can totally structure this entire conversation. I'll tell you like the bullet points of everything we should talk about, like in this order. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting. And so it's not my natural inclination to be that level of structure that TE users are. And also, TE users, after appointments I have with them, whether it's coaching appointments or appointments that they go to, they always ask if they're a TE dominant type, what are the next steps? Okay, what's next? And it's like, oh, action steps. Oh, that's so much. So those are the ways that TE is interesting, taking a different approach. And so, hello, Joyce and Roger. Thank you for this live. Can you both compare and contrast every parent to TI child between you two? Yeah, so when it's in the middle of your stack, you do want to meet people's needs, but you're going to have an easier time with boundaries than an FE dominant type would have. So FE doms might be more overflowing with their energy towards the world. And although like you have FE parent, you really do care about that. At a certain point, you're a little better at drawing boundaries than an FE dominant type because your TI is a moderating factor. So it's like, is it logical for you to stay up until 2 a.m. to talk to these group of people? And so it's a little bit of an easier time setting a boundary, even though even though it's hard to set boundaries and say no too. And with FE, it can be interesting in the second slot because it can result in conflict avoidance too. Sometimes you won't want to create unnecessary drama because your FE notices drama, and plus you're an introverted type that may have less energy to deal with the drama. I noticed like IJ types also like really struggle with energy. So that plus FE, you're like, all right, I don't want to cause drama because then I have to fix the drama, and that's energy, and I'm tired. And so you often find some FE auxiliaries to be more on the conflict avoidance side. That's why you won't find a lot of INFJs who identify with Enneagram 8, although you might, but it's less common because of that factor. Another thing too, a way that FE parent shows up is sometimes people can tell your emotions quicker than you know your emotions fully. So maybe you'll show hints of it on your face, and people will go like, are you feeling that way? And the FE parent will go like, am I feeling that way? To themselves. So that's one of the ways FE parent can also show up. How about you, Roger?
Yeah, so, and this is actually a really interesting question because so my girlfriend, she's an ESFJ, so I'm actually able to tell exactly what you just said. There are some situations that she will tell me on how she handled the situation, and I try to put myself in her situation, and then I see like, well, why did you even engage, or why did you even do this? Just disengage, walk away, don't do that, just slow down, think, don't engage so hastily, so like immediately, or don't let like your emotions get the best of you, just slow it down. So I guess, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Then I have that FE parent, right, of wanting to also like engage or do something about it, but that TI just stops me. It's like, is this really the most logical thing to do? Is this really the best course of action for you? No, it's not. There are other better ways to do, or there's other better things that you can do. So wow, yeah, that's fascinating. That happens all the time with me and with my girlfriend and I, where we have different ways on how we would handle a situation. And for my strategies, it's more of like less drama, less trying to rile other people up. Just leave them for what they're doing, and then just kind of move on from that.
Yeah, there's this level of calculation. It's like, do you really want to involve yourself in this?
Mm-hmm.
You'll also see it in types that have FE and TI in the middle of their stack too. So with ESTPs, you'll sometimes notice them calculating their involvement in FE too. Whereas ISFJs and INFJs will do some sort of like wanting to be measured or cautious before getting into a situation. So they're not immediately going to jump into the FE sometimes, because what's really driving the boat is their perception function, that's SI or NI at the top, which is a lot to do with foresight or seeing the long term, what's going to happen if you do that. It's like, if it's not going to be good if you do that, then maybe you shouldn't do that.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you get into typology? What particular aspects personally drew you in and compelled you to invest effort into exploring it? What did you used to think about typology before?
So I've gotten into MBTI since I was in like around the end of my high school years, and this was just more because I was getting out of a really terrible relationship at that time, and I was trying to understand more of myself. It was a kind of relationship where I invested so much of myself that I felt like I lost myself in that process. So my parents actually got me my first MBTI book, the Please Understand Me book. And since then, I became immensely interested in understanding myself, understanding other people, like how I function, how other people function. Way back in the day, again, I might be dating myself by saying this, but back when MySpace was a thing, there was a bulletin like piece there, and in that bulletin, people often just share each other different quiz questions, or like you answer like a whole bunch of questions about yourself or the things. And so I remember I used to love doing those, of like answering just silly random questions about myself. And all of those things just kind of reminded me of what like MBTI kind of brings out, of like, you know, who are you? What do you do? How do you approach the situation? So ever since that Please Understand Me book, and once I learned my type, then I was on a massive quest of trying to find out what everybody else's type was and trying to better understand them. Prior to it, I felt like I wasn't really understood by many people. I didn't know why I felt like I was different. I didn't understand why people did the things that they did. And so with all of MBTI, I got to learn so much from it. And I don't think I really had much of a thought before then about typology. I mean, I think the only thing that I think I was a little bit more critical before about like astrology. I think I was like, how the heck can you like predict anything about the stars and the planet alignments? Like, how can you make an excuse about all of that stuff? I felt like I was a lot more critical about it before. I'm a little more open-minded now, but I'm still kind of on the fence about astrology a bit.
Yeah. With NE inferior, something you'll notice with it is a skepticalness to new things that aren't proven yet. So it's like, oh, okay, this thing, what actually proves it to actually work or be real or be something in reality that could actually be fruitful in some way. So it's almost like if there's no past experience to anchor it with, how can you place full confidence into that thing yet?
Yep.
Cool. And so, how do you combat imagining worst case scenarios or new experiences?
Definitely just trying to engage back in the earlier function. So if I know that I'm in the grip of just pure NE, it's just more of trying to get back at, start going back up step by step. TI doesn't necessarily help too much because I still end up being influenced negatively on what I think. So I go to FE, and what is FE? What is FE about? FE is about being with other people, talking to other people, gaining their perspectives, their knowledge, their understanding. So a lot of what I used to do back in high school was, if I was in a situation or something that I felt like was just so stressful and I didn't know what to do, I would often ask my friends about their opinions. Like, hey, what do you think about this? Or like, you know, what would happen if this happened to you? What would you do? What is your thought process like? And so after kind of gaining all of that information from everybody else, that's kind of like what ends up helping me make my own decision after that. So even if everybody tells me not to do something, in the end, I still might end up doing something that I want to do either way against everybody else. But it just kind of confirms a little bit more of what I maybe wanted to already do all along. So to get myself out of that habit of imagining the worst scenarios, talking to other people, getting myself out of that kind of isolation that I put myself in. Because the negative NE, the imagining worst scenarios, that happens when I'm by myself, when I'm in isolation. That doesn't really happen when I'm with other people, because when I'm with other people, my entire focus is on everybody else. And to combat new experiences, the preemptive thing that I always do is look up as much information as I can about the place. So if I'm looking for a new place to eat, I will go to Yelp, or I'll look up different like comments and stuff about the place, or see the menu and see like things that I might like or anything. But it's never just, it's very rare that I will ever just randomly put myself in a new experience without doing some prior research to it first. And something that my ESTJ friend finds really funny is that for all like, because we really love like the Marvel movies, superhero movies. So what I always love to do is kind of get a background. It's like, oh, and I mean, maybe some people might know already, but like for the new Guardians of the Galaxy, the new character Adam Warlock is going to be there. They already declared the actor for him. And so I know that the first thing that I'm going to do before watching the movie is do all my research on finding out who Adam Warlock is and what significance he had in the comics, just so that I have that kind of background of understanding before I get myself into watching the movie and everything. And that's just something that I do with usually any other kind of new experience that I have.
Yeah. Having some background information on it is a good type of thing to have. I've had some SI users tell me before how they'll have card catalogs of things, because having almost a memory or a stable sensory thing of it is sometimes more enjoyable than the actual SE of it and the actual just going through it bare without anything. It's better to have something familiar to anchor yourself in. It almost makes it less overstimulating, because like pure SE without anything to anchor it on is a little bit overstimulating. And so you'll hear with some SI DOMs, they'll use the word contained because they like to feel like contained within, like there's at least something they can anchor what they're now experiencing to, so it's not completely foreign. Because the unknown is what NE inferior doesn't like. It's like completely unknown is bad. Maybe if you have something to anchor it on, it's fine. It's Which ISFJ descriptions do you relate so much to that it hurts?
Ooh, wow. Huh. Have to think about that one. Let's see. It might not be the case so much now, but I know that in the past, something that used to hurt me so much was the whole being a doormat. that common phrase of ISFJs are just a doormat. You can just use them when you want to, and they'll help you out in whatever you want, and then you can just go ahead and leave them, and then that's it. I often felt a lot in my past that that's all that I kept doing, of just trying to help people because I really wanted to. And when I found out that those same people didn't reciprocate the same thing to me back then, I tried not to let it bother me. I just overlooked it and said, no, they're my friends. Like, of course they are. And usually it took me a long time to then realize that the things that I do and what I'm able to give to other people is not something to just be taken lightly or anything. So I think over time I started then learning boundaries, but I know for sure that the whole ISFJ description of just being able to kind of be easily manipulated or be used by other types, that one definitely hurt for me a lot before.
Yeah. The ISFJ growth path for some of them is when they're younger, they're accidentally doormats, and it takes a while to kind of assert that boundary, because that sometimes means maybe upsetting people. And auxiliary FE does not want to upset people when it doesn't have to. Especially with SI, you kind of want to keep the homeostasis, keep the equilibrium, keep the good constant. And so sometimes that results in younger ISFJs, or even I know some of them who are older too also deal with accidentally being a doormat or a sitting duck with on the unhealthy side.
Yeah.
And so ISFJs punning against the future. Got it. I'm trying to find a question. Roger, do you enjoy puzzles?
Ooh. I guess it depends on what kind of puzzles. I mean, like very simply, I used to like puzzle pieces back when I was a kid. Puzzles from like an IQ test, maybe not as much. Like block design or like trying to find like patterns and such. I love word searches. I don't like crossword puzzles. Sudoku is okay. Yeah, it depends on what kind of puzzle it might be. Some puzzles I like a lot more than others.
Does your FE like people puzzles? Figuring out people? What do you like to figure out about people?
Just what about people? I feel like just knowing anything about their past. If I'm really interested in someone, I want to know where, maybe even kind of like background information of like where, how are they brought up? What have they done? What are their life aspirations? What are their goals in life? What do they think about certain topics? Yeah, I mean, if given the opportunity, yeah, I definitely enjoy like understanding more of what a person is, what a person does, maybe even up to a point where I can even possibly kind of predict how they might handle a situation, and kind of, be able to kind of predict what they might do in a situation.
Yeah. You like to figure out this scrapbook of people's lives, like the past of them, so you can kind of predict their preferences. That's so awesome. You sound like a really good friend. And so what helps you identify as a Jungian sensing dominant type?
What helped me identify? I think once I started reading that Please Understand Me book, and I started reading about ISFJs, about like never forgetting their past, or like maybe even possibly like in an unhealthy way start to hold grudges, I started seeing myself a lot in that, especially when I was younger. I noticed that I didn't forget easily. I was able to recall things and just kind of live through them again in my mind. Um, and just always be so focused and in the past. And the crazy fascinating thing is that, like I said before, like this is something that I don't control. This is just all automatic for me. I i have to put real effort into trying to get myself out of that situation. um and most of the time, half the time, I don't even realize what my like the instinctual thing that I do right then from the get go. Like I mentioned before about an example of like an apple. That is just something automatic that happens. I won't realize it until after the fact. Like, oh wow, here I go again. I just associated this apple with like something from my past. It's something that I don't control. It's just the first thing that pops up, the first thing that I think about, and I don't even give it a second thought until afterwards. But yeah, definitely reading the book, the Please Understand Me book has helped me identify a lot with that SI, and just going on the internet and just seeing what other people have said, and going on blogs and seeing how other people relate to that too has, yeah, definitely helped me understand it a bit better.
Yeah, Please Understand Me Too is a really good book for these holistic type descriptions, and also for temperament theory if you want to learn about SJ, SP, NF, NT. Cool. And so, what is the one thing for you as an ISFJ that differentiates yourself the most from INFJ?
That is a big question. I know there's a lot of mistyped people out there and everything, so I know it's like the number one thing that people tend to ask. Um, I have been very lucky. So I've been a part of meetup groups in the past before, and I there was a meetup group in particular that I would go to that was kind of like an NF group. So I actually spent a lot of time with INFJs, INFPs, ENFPs, and very few ENFJs. But something about how NFs connect with one another is just such a different thing. Like the way that, and I was so lucky to be able to witness this, like two people who never met before, and they decided to meet in this meetup, and the way that they just clicked and connect with each other was just so amazing. Like they just started talking in something that I couldn't even understand. It was so abstract that I could understand, but the other person got it, and they just clicked and it all made sense. um I feel that for us ISFJs, we're just so down to earth. We're just so focused on the material world. So if I'm sitting across from someone, the first thing that I'm going to notice is how they're acting. Are they, moving their leg? Are they twitching? Are they looking somewhere else? Are they doing something with their hands? Do they look bored? Do they look pleased? How are they feeling? I feel that with INFJs, it's not so attached to the materialistic world. It's about so much other things outside of what the world has to present itself. And so, I mean, if you find yourself definitely thinking more a little bit about the past a lot, or you find yourself thinking about what is going on in the present moment, what are you feeling and experiencing in the materialistic world, then that kind of feels more ISFJ. I think with INFJs, it's a bit more of a struggle, a bit more of an effort. For ISFJs, that just comes naturally.
Yeah, with INFJs, it'll be easier to focus on what's not there, what you can't see. And one of the ways you can kind of see this is before you go to bed. Let's say you're having a sleepover with friends, or you have someone next to you in bed. What do you tend to talk to when you're about to go to sleep? Are you recalling the events of the day, that things that actually happened, or stuff that's actually in reality? Or are you talking about concepts that you can never verify, concepts that you can never truly find the complete answer for, but you like kind of looking at the unknown before you go to bed? It's almost like this insatiable need to look at the unknown at all times. If you're an NI Dom, your eye is always going to be more interested in the unknown. So what is actually unknowable, unseeable? I'm wondering, Roger, so what do you talk about before bed?
What do I talk about before bed?
Yeah.
Like to somebody else or to myself? Like to myself? I mean, mm, I mean, sometimes I'll just kind of think, yeah, no, that's funny. It's all about planning again. It's all about planning what tomorrow's going to bring. What am I going to be doing tomorrow? What do I have to work on tomorrow? What am I going to do as soon as I get out of bed? And do I have to work on this project? Do I have to do this other thing? What will I be doing? So it's all just kind of planning. Yeah, right before bed is just more of planning of like, all right, getting myself prepared for what's going to come the next day.
Yeah. Where that's very tangible, it's very real because it's actually things you're going to be dealing with. Whereas
Mm.
if you're an INFJ, it's more likely you're going to be thinking about something along the lines of, how can I understand the core of reality better? And it's like, how could you ever know the answer to that, INFJ? Well, that's just fun to think about. Come on.
That is awesome. I love those kind of things too, but it's definitely not the first thing that pops into my mind as I'm going to bed.
Definitely. And so, what is your personal difficulty in communicating with people who don't value SI-DOM methodologies?
My personal difficulty, I mean, it's unfortunately kind of a little bit general, but I know that I've talked to some INTJs in particular in the past, and they would, yeah, they wouldn't have any issue of telling me like, why do you care about the past? Why do you care about looking at all these details? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, why put so much effort? Like, you're wasting your time thinking about these things of the past when you could be so much more productive. You could do so much more if you just get your head out of there and just start focusing on actually doing things. Um, so I mean, I think personal difficulty in communicating are just people who aren't willing to understand, people who aren't willing to open up the possibility of another way of looking at things. Because I know that for other types, right? Obviously, looking into the past is a huge waste of time and definitely not something to recommend. But for us ISFJs, it's a need. It's something that we have to do and something that we automatically do anyway without us even thinking about it. I think, yeah, the most difficult personal difficulty in communicating is just people who just don't want to listen, or maybe just people who just want to say their piece and not really learn something from that interaction.
Yeah, that makes sense too. Sometimes with SI too, with NI as well, there's a slowness with IJs with retrieving the inside of their internal perceiving process. So sometimes when they're internally perceiving, to other people it might look like they're slowing down too much. And so sometimes it can make people impatient, or it can go like, why are you thinking so much about this thing, or why are you staying in inaction, like just kind of do it. But it's like, hey, you have to kind of, with SI, look through the filing cabinet of all of the past experiences that can inform you of and serve as a good reference point on how to understand this current situation, so that you don't jump into a situation all willy-nilly, and so that you don't expose yourself to unnecessary risk. And so oftentimes people don't understand how when you give an SI-DOM more time to think, it actually allows them to make sure they're not jumping into a situation too chaotically, and that they're able to make a good decision. And feeling rushed in that might feel like you're putting yourself in a situation where you're not making the best decision. And so, do you find it easy to recall moments involving feelings, yours versus others? And how do you process feelings?
Like that question, huh? Definitely. I mean, when it comes to recalling moments we always have to attach something with feeling. I mean, there are some things that we do recall that have no feeling, like, I mean, remembering like what my history professor was wearing, I guess, when I was in high school and I was trying to get into the chess club. I don't think that has any emotion or feeling into it, but I remember what he was wearing for some random reason. But for memories that are a lot more charged with feelings, yes, I'm able to recall a lot more things that happened around me, or recalling other things that were going on in that time. With my own memories, yes. When it comes to other people, that depends on what that person means to me. So if I just met like a random person and maybe it was just a very stale kind of conversation, I don't think I'm going to remember a lot of things. But if it's somebody that I care about, if it's a friend or family member, there's a lot of things that I'm going to remember from that just because I know it might mean something and it might be important for them later or something like that. And again, the weird thing about SI is that this is all automatic. So this is not something that I have to put any effort into. It's not like all right, Roger, think about like this moment, because this moment you're going to remember, like, 10 months from now, you're going to remember, you're going to recall this thing, and you're going to impress all your friends that you remember this whole thing that happened. It's just things that just happen very, very automatic. I would say that I think recalling my own memories is definitely a little bit easier than recalling like experiences of other people, just because since they're my memories, my memories, it's more beneficial for me to know more things about what happened in my life as opposed to other people. But definitely I can remember things that happened to other people. Like it must be a relief to my friends when they're able to kind of call me and say like, hey, like, yeah, did I tell you about this one thing? I'm like, yeah, I remember. You told me about this one thing. I remember we talked about it last week. Yeah, I remember. And they're able to just kind of continue on with their story versus with maybe with other types. You have to kind of remind them like, oh, well, I talked to you about this last time. Like, you don't remember? Like, all right, let me tell you again. For us, it's not really much of an issue. We can remember. We'll remember what we talked about last month, last week, and kind of even sometimes follow up on you on that, depending on, what you mean to us in our lives. And processing feelings, that is so tough. um, I always share this story because I feel like it just makes the most sense to me. I remember one day that I woke up and I was kind of like pacing back and forth. I was trying to understand what I was feeling. Like I was just pacing back and forth, like not getting what was going on. Like what's going on with me? Like why do I even feel this way? Why do I feel like just uncomfortable? Something inside me just feels so weird. And I'm just pacing back and forth, just trying to think about it in my room. And eventually, I just kind of gave up. I just like went to my bed and I'm just staring at the ceiling, just trying to understand what's going on. And my sister walks in through my door. She takes one look at me and she's like, "Why are you mad?" And I was like, wait, what? I'm mad? Like, and I started thinking about it. I'm like, she's right. Like, yeah, I'm mad about this one thing. Like, this happened. Like, what? Oh man. And so it's a struggle to process my own feelings sometimes. I don't it becomes even more complicated when I don't know if the emotion that I'm feeling is from somebody else or if it's my own. And so I think like the best way that I found to kind of differentiate from that is just what was I feeling before the interaction with another person? If whatever I'm feeling afterwards is something different, then there's a high chance that I just absorb the emotion from the other person and that's not something that just comes from my own self. But yeah, to process emotion, wow, I need time. I think the things that, at least for me personally, have helped is just kind of listening to music, kind of like paying attention to the lyrics, seeing what they're saying, kind of even recalling what other people have gone through, going in the internet, seeing other blog or questions about what other people have done in regards to whatever I might be feeling at that time. But definitely takes a lot of work. It's very annoying, but I really have to slow down and really think to try to understand what it is that I'm feeling or going through.
Yeah. Sometimes with ISFJs or INFJs, there can be this confusion as to what am I really feeling? And then other people will say, you're mad or you're this feeling. And you're like, huh, maybe I am that way. And yeah.
It's so funny because, like, what we're yeah, I mean, you get it too. We're FE. Like, the feelings that we have is all external. So we externally will show it off to people, but then that doesn't mean we are aware of it. So it's such an interesting thing, and I'm thankful that other people can see it because I don't have a mirror in front of me the whole time where I can just kind of see what I'm feeling and everything.
Yeah, and I find it mind blowing because sometimes I'll even try to hide it a little bit too, but it's like everyone's like, "Hey, I saw it," and I'm like, "Wait, what? Are you Sherlock Holmes?" But everyone can see it, so they're not Sherlock.
Oh my goodness. Every time that happens, I just change the conversation. It's like, no, we're not talking about me. We're talking about you. What's going on with you? How's everything? And SI comes really useful because then I'll bring up something of like maybe a past issue that they were talking about. Like, you told me that like this was going on. So like, what's happening now? How did that work now? So a little bit of that FE manipulation there, but yeah, I don't try to talk about my own feelings with other people usually. I'm just so much used to like, no, let's focus on you. Let's talk about something else now.
Yeah, absolutely. So as an FE user, do you have a hard time setting boundaries in unhealthy dynamics?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is just something that's very common for us FE users. Setting boundaries, unhealthy dynamics. I know that I had a lot of difficulty with this when I was younger. It's not so much the case anymore because I've kind of grown from that a little bit. I've had to learn things the hard way a lot from this. So, yeah, even I think now what I'm starting to realize that when it comes to unhealthy dynamics, once I start to realize something is not maybe going in a good direction, positive direction, I will actually put my foot down and stop before it even ever gets there. So like, what could be like an example? If I just met somebody and I start realizing that they're maybe kind of pushing it a little bit, pushing the envelope, maybe like they're trying to flirt with me or do something like that, and I'm not clearly interested, then rather than entertain the idea, or rather than just kind of let it go and not be confrontational about it, I've learned like, no, gotta put my foot down, say like, hey, like maybe I might be reading things wrong, but I just kind of feel like maybe there's a misunderstanding here. I really value you as a friend. I really care about you as a person, but I have no interest in, anything else further than that. And depending on how they reply, then can kind of go on from there. I know that a lot of ISFJs, because they don't want to do that whole confrontation things, they'll often just kind of let it go and let it be and kind of let them snowball into a worse and worse thing. And in the case that I just said right now, if the person replies in a very problematic way, like they say, oh, like, how dare you? Like, I didn't mean that. Or like, how could you ever think of that like that of me? Like, what do you think? And they say all of this stuff and I won't say anything. And then the next day, like, hey, I'm so sorry. I said that. Like trying to apologize after that and trying to get me to still talk to them. I'm not going to entertain that anymore. I already know from that kind of first impression of what they're capable of and what they're willing to do, rather than even put myself in that situation, just kind of ignore, block it off, or just kind of part ways from there. I've learned to recognize those kinds of unhealthy behaviors because of my past experiences. So at this point, I don't entertain it any longer. I'd rather just cut it off immediately in the beginning than having to risk something worse happen in the future.
Yeah. It is hard to set boundaries sometimes. It takes time for FE to kind of learn. For instance, with starting my own coaching business, you sometimes have people who forget to pay you. And like I had this client forget to pay me 8 times or like something along the lines of that. And I'm like, every time I'm like, hey, pay me with this link. But like sometimes FE says things so kindly that people don't remember because they miss the point almost. And it's like, hey, no, actually you have to do this thing. So FE is a bit of a pushover sometimes. And that sucks because it's almost feeling invisible after a while. It's like you're so much of a doormat, sometimes you can feel invisible. It's like, great, thank you. And so, but I don't do that anymore. Or at least I try not to. How is it now that you have the vocabulary to explain the cognitive functions used by you and the people in your life compared to when you didn't?
Yeah, I think just from learning all of these things a few years ago, I mean, I've done as much research as I could learning about this in the past. I mean, going on the internet, seeing what other websites say about different things. And obviously, in order to relate to other people who don't know about this, I've had to kind of dumb it down a little bit, or just kind of maybe even engage in overgeneralizations a little bit, just to have other people understand. But yeah, I've done what I could, and I think the biggest thing too is to always remember that this is still just a theory as well, right? I mean, I know that, and I agree with it too. There's so many things about MBTI that just make so much sense and make so much sense to other people. But at the end of the day, it's still a theory, and it might not apply to every single person on the planet. So I think I always come off of it. I started off with that, and especially for I have an ISFP friend that when I started talking about MBTI, he kind of got like a little offended of like, man, I mean, categorized into a box, like, oh, like I'm just this one thing, like just this one letter, this one type, and that's it. Like I can't be my own self or whatever. So I think after that exchange, I kind of started thinking like, yeah, I mean, just approach it with the sense that this is a theory. It's not 100%, you know, um, it it's just a theory, and these are the possibilities of what could happen. But yeah, I think it's just doing the research, just looking up of what other people have said, going on different internet sites, talking to other people, even with the same personality type that I was. And yeah, these are all things that I would never have been able to understand if I had not just gone on the internet. And I wouldn't place all of my eggs in one basket. So I wouldn't just rely on one single internet article or whatever. You got to really go everywhere, look and see what other people say. Because one person might say that like FE is all about manipulation, but then you go onto another site and then they talk about like, well, FE is about more than that. It's about harmony and, you know, making sure that everyone's okay. So you're going to get a lot of different things, but kind of getting all of that information kind of paints a better picture for you, and hopefully then to everybody else, about what a certain function might mean, or what a certain, you know, letter in MBTI might be.
Absolutely. Hard agree, Roger. I find that with type theory, there are sometimes people who like to say that they don't want to be fit into a box, and I find that they tend to be introverted feeling FI users. So it's the FPs,
Mm-hmm.
ironically, who say that they cannot be put into a box, but while saying that, put themselves into a box, because that's like exactly into the stereotype of what their type is. And
Yep.
so with these archetypes, I think where it becomes harder to apply it to every person is if you try it off of behavior, not everyone's going to have the same exact behavior. The type theory holds true when you look at it from a structuralist perspective. So if you see it as the way that your mind kind of metabolizes or processes information, it is true, I would say 100% of the time. But if you do it behaviorally, like off of observable descriptions, you're going to run into this, not every human being can fit into an observable description. But that's because people can't be watered down to behaviors. People are more complex than that. So type is about your cognition. It's not about your behavior per se, but behavior can show likely trends of cognition. And so that's where the complexity comes in. It's kind of interesting with vocabulary and the cognitive functions. It's most useful when the people in your life actually know theory, so you can actually talk to them about it. Otherwise, it sounds like you're speaking another language. Yeah, but it's good for miscommunications. It's typically a tool that a lot of organizations use to resolve team conflict. So if people are fighting, it's often due to personality differences. It's not that either party is more horrible than the other party. Sometimes that is the case, but sometimes it comes down to personality differences. And so it can be a lifesaver in a lot of relationships, personality theory. And yeah. And so how do you relate to INTPs? Do you find that you understand one another well because you share the same function group?
Ah, man, that's so funny. One of my other best friends is an INTP, and my interaction with him is just awesome, you know. And It's such a weird thing because I always hear it on like every Facebook group, like about INTPs, trolls. They just love to troll. They love to, make push buttons and make people upset. And you would think that someone like that just wouldn't get along very well with an ISFJ, but somehow, yeah, right, with having that same functions, it's such a weird, interesting, it's a different kind of relationship. With my INTP best friend, like we get along so well. He understands the way that I function. I partly understand the way that he functions because obviously with him, and with other INTPs, there's just so much. But I I feel that with at least with INTPs, yeah, I understand a lot of the things that even the things that he doesn't say, I can just feel it. I can pick up on it. Um, and it's always been so interesting to me whenever I go on Facebook groups and I notice like this would be like in other groups that I'm not an admin in, because if I was an admin I'd have to put a stop to it or whatever. In other groups that I'm not an admin in, I can see an INTP trolling or saying some random thing, and when I get myself involved and when I just try to talk to the INTP, like things change. It's such a weird thing. Like they're trying to troll, but then I just come in with a kind of like a voice of logic and reason, or I just kind of just try to just talk, just try to engage them, entertain them, and they completely change their voice. They're no longer trolling, and they're actually more engaged in having a fun, random conversation with me. So generally, with INTPs that I've known on the internet, they're funny, they're fun. I love the way that they think, and I I don't get offended by them just because I know of the kind of person that they are. At least I don't think it's the things that they do is necessarily offensive. I know it's offensive to some, but really it all just comes down to they're just trying to find what's the limit? How long can I poke? How much can I poke before you are upset with me or whatever? And yeah, I mean, there is still a bit of difficulty in understanding an INTP because obviously with INTPs, they're not the most open of individuals. So even with my best friend INTP, it's still not the easiest kind of thing to do. And it with any kind of relationship, it takes two to tango, right? If that person has to be willing to open up too, that person has to be willing to let somebody else in too. And I'm lucky that my INTP friend does that. But yeah, it's not like I can just find some random INTP and just be able to immediately out of nowhere be able to know more about them and everything. There's a big part in them too, where if they're willing to engage, they're willing to share more things with me. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. You have a knack for getting along with people who are interesting. I love my INTPs. They're great. And so Metric asks, how do you see SI in other people as it goes down the stack? I know TE DOMs see lower stack TE as being cute or childlike.
Let's see the interaction that I have with my ESFJ girlfriend. So the SI, I do see it as very interesting because they, at least as far as I've been able to observe, at least from her, maybe for other ESFJs it might be different, but with her, at least from what she tells me, is that because she has a greater control over her introverted intuition as an auxiliary, she controls exactly what she wants to remember. So anything necessarily like happy or fun, she will have very fantastic memory about it. But when I try to like talk to her about something maybe that she just didn't care about, she'll be like, huh, what? Like, oh, what, you told me that? And she'll try to like force or try to say that like, oh, like you never told me about it. You told to somebody else. Like, no, I swear, I know we talked about it. It was like last night or last week. I know we were talking about it. I was here in my room. We were on the phone. I told you about this one thing. But yeah, so it's oftentimes really interesting, at least auxiliary SI. So they are able to remember with great detail about things they care about. So she will oftentimes on things that I didn't place so much importance of, she'll remember things that I don't if she really valued that experience or that whatever thing that we were possibly talking about. She'll remember it a little bit better than I can because it's very specific. So that's for auxiliary SI. Tertiary SI, I don't think I've had much experience with that. What types would that be with tertiary SI?
It would be the INTP and the INFP.
INTP and INFP. I think, well, with the INFPs that I've known, it feels kind of like a little frustrating just because if they're talking to me about something that happened to them and they tell me about something that like maybe was if they started telling me about something that they've done or in the past or whatever, and then a few months later they tell me about maybe a different kind of situation, but they do the exact same thing again, then it's a little bit frustrating because then I say, like, didn't you already try to do this before? Didn't you already do this and it didn't work and you're here in a different situation, but you just did it again? So it kind of feels almost like a little frustrating that it's not the same way with SI where like you're kind of learning from your experiences per se. It works a little bit different, which can then get kind of frustrating. And with INTP, I don't think there's been much of an issue with it because again, I know that they're not going to remember everything that we talk about, so I don't judge them harshly on it. It's like, oh, don't you remember? Like we already did this one thing, or we talked about this. Like, huh? We did. It's like, oh yeah, whatever, no big deal. I think with INFPs, it might just be a little bit more on the emotional side because obviously there is emotion tied to them for INFP. So it just gets a little more frustrating of like, why are you putting yourself in a horrible situation and getting yourself hurt again? And then you're crying and then you're telling me about this and you're just sad again. So I think with INFPs, it's a little more frustrating. And SI last, so that would be ENFP and ENTP, right?
Yeah.
ENFP, I have more experience with. I think at that point I've just I lose all hope. So it's like, I know you're not going to remember this one thing, or if you do remember, that's nice, but I don't expect you to remember really anything or notice any kind of details. Like I'll take over at that point. I'll go ahead and help you remember this one thing or explain to you what kind of details were going on. And with ENTP, I don't think I've met any ENTPs. So, I mean, outside of just on the internet, but there hasn't really been much of an opportunity for me to kind of see how their SI works on the internet. But yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Really well put, Roger. One of the other ways you can kind of see SI going down the stack is SI in the dominant slot might be more like a movie, and then SI in the auxiliary slot is more like a YouTube video, and then SI in the tertiary spot is more like a short TikTok, and then SI in the inferior slot might be little camera shots with a camera. So it's almost like short, buggy shots with a video recorder.
Makes
Because
sense.
yeah. Mm-hmm. What cognitive function do you want to understand better? What would you like to experience a stimulation of for a day or two?
Oh, man. I think I really want to understand the FI a little bit more. FI has just been such a weird and tricky thing for me. It's just so massively different from the extroverted feeling because just because I might end up saying or doing something that is for the group or just for a group of people or just what everybody says, I still might end up offending that FI. And then I just feel absolutely terrible for being lackadaisical with what I'm saying. And then I feel bad. And then it's like, oh, what can I do? And then they're really pissed off about it. And then the next day it's like, oh, well, I'm done with that. They just move on. And like, I can't move on from that. I feel bad. What can I do to make sure this never happens again? And I'm like, I don't really want to talk about it anymore. That happened in the past. Why are you even bringing this up right now? Like, let's just move on from it. And I get just so jaded from that. I have to put a lot of effort in trying to understand a little like FI a little bit more outside of just being this selfish function, because unfortunately that stereotype has just kind of been proven true a little bit, where FI is just selfish. It's just my morals, my values, what I want to do, my experiences, me. And that's all I keep seeing of like, wow, you're just talking all about you. Like, what about the other person? Did you think about how they might be feeling about this? Or, like you made a choice that involved with other people, but like, how do you think the other person feels? And they're like, oh, I don't know. Like, that doesn't matter. I don't know. I'm just doing what I want to do. I should live for me, right? It's like, I guess. So I think FIs is something I really want to understand better. TE would be the next one, but I think TE I've kind of been able to appreciate and understand a little bit more over time. FI is just tricky. I think it's just because of the emotional stuff that comes from it. And to experience a simulation of a cognitive function, I mean, just for kicks, just for fun, it would definitely be probably just NE. I want to feel all that crazy, crazy high of infinite possibilities and happy random possibilities. I mean, I kind of already get that, obviously not to the same extent, but I would love to be able to experience the full onset of that.
That's lovely. Yeah. With the FI comment, I would agree, but I would also say not all FI users. There are a lot of selfless FI users too. So no cognitive function has a more moral basis. Basically, cognitive functions are amoral. So you'll have really unhealthy versions of a type and very healthy versions of a type. Especially if an FI user is a Enneagram type 2, they're going to be more on the relating a little bit to even FE in some sense, because they're still a feeling type, and so they're still going to care about people's feelings. However, what I notice about FI sometimes is it's not exactly absorbing emotions in the same way FE is. So FI is more selective with what it will empathize with. So if you have a position that they don't agree with, they can actually choose to shut off their empathy towards your position because they don't agree with your position. And so sometimes that can cause some problems. So I totally agree, Roger, when you talked about how you'll accidentally offend the FI user, and then like you really want to know what you did wrong because you really want to make up for it, and you really want to make sure that never happens again. But sometimes it's hard to kind of drag out of FI what actually offended them. So either like they have to process that emotion on their own. They won't share with you exactly why they were offended all the time. And it's kind of like FE wants to know, like, please give me feedback so then I can adjust myself so I can make you as happy as possible. And so it can be distressing when someone doesn't tell you exactly why you hurt their feelings all the time. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely not to say that like FI is selfish for sure. It's unfortunately like that's just a general kind of overgeneralization that people say, and I know there's so much more to it, and that's why I definitely want to understand it more, because in of itself, I think I've met like a few other INFPs, and FI is such a beautiful like sacred thing, and it's really, really beautiful to be able to like see and just feel that. But yeah, it's definitely just a function I want to understand better.
Yay. And so I'm not sure if this has been addressed, but what would the assertion look like for you as an ISFJ? So I have a friend who's an ISFJ. She's always so reserved. I've never seen her just get bothered. Lol.
Assertion. Even when it comes to being, I mean, obviously depending on the context, depending on the person, but I still would try to be as polite and professional as possible when it comes to, telling somebody about something. So in the scenario that I just said earlier, like if there's a person that's trying to like flirt with me, for example, and I'm not interested, I would cut that off immediately and say, hey, I apologize if I'm reading things wrong, but I'm kind of getting the impression, that maybe you're seeing our relationship as something more than friends. And I just want to let you know that it's not something that I see myself. And I don't mean to offend or apologize you. I think you're a great, wonderful person. I just want to let you know how I feel about you, and just kind of leave it at that. Depending on how they respond to that, then I can move on from there. But if it comes to, let's say, a person I just met and I start realizing that they are kind of using my time a little bit more and they're not really being the best friend, I guess, for me, I would want to bring it up. I would want to bring it up to them and be like, I kind of realize that like a lot of the times you ask a lot of my help, and then when it comes for the same thing, like I just don't see that kind of same reciprocation. Is everything okay with you? Is there something going on or something that you want to tell me? And if they're just being shady about it and don't want to tell me anything about that, it's like, okay, well, all right, I understand. All right. And just kind of slowly start not talking to them or just saying, hey, yeah, I'm busy. Sorry, don't have much of my time. And just kind of setting up my boundary of like, yeah, I'm sorry, I can't help you anymore. I got other things to deal with, moving on and kind of going from there. What else with assertion? Yeah, I think for me, it's just been cutting it right from the beginning before it gets into any kind of intense kind of a thing. But even when I try to be assertive, I try to be as nice as possible. If they are not nice and they start kind of coming at me not being nice, then I will be just as assertive and just be like, okay, clearly I realized talking to you was not within my best interest. I am sorry, but I will end this conversation and block them or just completely ignore their comments, because I know that anything that they say at that point, I know that they're just trying to get me to react. They're trying to get me to say something back to them. So if they start like insulting me and saying that you're an idiot, you're never going to be a good person or blah, 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 I'm not going to take that because I know that they're just trying whatever they possibly can to get me to react, to get me to say something. And I know that with a lot of ISFJs, unfortunately, they take those kinds of things very personal, especially if it's a friend that a person they consider to be a great friend to them. And all of a sudden that friend starts acting a certain way to them, then they can't, ISFJ, like they get very, very caught up in the feeling and the emotion. And then like, how could you say that about me after everything I've done for you? Why would you say this? Why would you do this? And just keep that cycle going and going. And that's not the best thing to do. The best thing to do is just to leave them, give them a few minutes, have them think about what they've done and just kind of move on from that. It's difficult for ISFJs in general to do that, I understand, but I mean, it's just something that takes time and practice. Once you start realizing little by little, having the idea in your head and then just keep at it, over time, eventually you'll start to realize like when you should be cutting boundaries. Like I'm feeling like I'm getting burned out and I don't know why, or I'm being burned out after talking to this person. I feel burned out when they ask me about this. I feel burned out when, they start talking or whatever, and just kind of moving on from there.
Absolutely. With assertion, it seems like ISFJs have a door slam. It's almost like they're just gonna slowly, politely refuse being around you or decline doing things with you or just decline things. And eventually they wean out of your life so much that they just disappear. So it seems like you never want to have you never want this big drastic event. You just kind of want things to like slowly shove themselves out of your life. You don't want to make a big deal out of it.
And if they don't allow me to do that, then yeah, like you said, door slam. It's like, well, yeah, clearly talking to you was not within my best interest. Sorry I offended you. Goodbye. That's it. End of conversation. Because at that point, just feeding it's just not going to make anything better.
It's so true. Hasta la bye bye. Clap, clap, vanish.
Yeah.
And you're the admin of ISFJ Haven, so you technically have the ability to banish people, but you probably don't because you're a nice guy.
Well, it depends. Yeah, it depends because some people are, oh man. And yeah, and maybe it's more of a harsh thing to do, but right. I mean, obviously I talk about situations with the other admins about how I should approach certain issues. But if I do see a person that's really just not contributing, like they just got into the group and they're already causing a ruckus, then I'm not even going to give them the chance. It's like, no, you just came here to cause trouble. Goodbye. So, and, good luck on your way out. If it's a person that, had a long time there and is just recently starting to cause problems, then sure, I'll bring it up to the admins, maybe even have a personal talk with the other person. But yeah, generally speaking, it's the internet. It's very easy to just kind of banish by goodbye, and if our group isn't cool, there's plenty of other groups that you can be a part of.
You're so reasonable and thoughtful, and you actually really think things through before you kind of pull the trigger. So I respect that. And so Katie asks, how do you organize data? Chronologically, or is it a jumbled mess?
Depends on what you mean by data. I mean, if it if it's like data of like my memories, then I mean, yeah, it's kind of like all chronological. Or depending on how I'm feeling, then I will prioritize the jumbled mess, things that make more sense to me. If it comes to like, mm, yeah, I guess if it comes to like a mathematical thing or statistics or something like that, then yeah, I mean, chronological or whatever order I want to put it in. I guess in general, jumbled mess, unless it has a purpose, doesn't really help me very much. So, like, if I had a list of information, um, and it made sense to organize it in a jumbled mess of like, well, this information or these bits of information pertain to love. These bits of information pertain to the economy. This bits of information pertains to, I don't know, political agendas and whatever. Then sure, it's all a jumbled mess, but they all have a category of what makes sense to me. So I guess in that case, it wouldn't be chronological. So I mean, whatever kind of organization of data just has to make sense, has to have some kind of, I guess, header to that data.
Yeah. One of the cues that someone is using SI is if they recall their memories chronologically. So SI is going to recall a sequence of information. So it's going to be a movie. A movie rarely happens out of order. So they're not going to tell you point Z and then B and then A and then Z and then they're not going to go around in a chaotic mess. So SI is going to recall the memory actually as it was. Or what you remembered of that. So what was pertaining to what you subjectively found important to take away from that. The jumbled mess part could be maybe the TI or even FE sometimes. Maybe the TI is like, how am I going to organize this? And then the TI has its own way of putting it into a Jenga tower or a Rubik's Cube or framework where it's like, okay, that makes the most sense to me, but maybe it doesn't make as much sense to other people. So it might be hard for ISFJs for some of them to tell other people their logic because TI might bore some people. I've I've seen that with sometimes TI. Not everyone wants to know why a certain way works the way that it works or how you understand something, and so sometimes like auxiliary FE can notice that and go like, oh, not everyone wants to hear the TIY behind this thing. So, you know what, maybe I'll just keep FE social pleasantries or keep the polite kind of demeanor because if no one's going to listen, then why say it type of thing. So that's something there. Let
That
me
is funny.
know.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, let me know if I ever mischaracterize your experience that way. Always feel free to correct.
For sure. It's funny that you say that because actually, now that I think about it, like, right, if whenever I want to explain something about me or something that happened to me, I always say, okay, let me start at the beginning, which may be like several days or weeks or whatever outside of that situation where I have to give the background information in order for them to understand what my train of thought is or like how everything came to be.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. And so Jason asks, do things in your life have sentimental value? If so, how does it feel? How does sentimentality towards your world manifest?
Well, yes. I mean, if you're referring to things like as in materialistic things that I have, yeah, there's a lot of things that I have within my possession that have value. I mean, I guess I don't have the one with me now, but I have like a little doll that like one of my friends made that like I keep with me just because she made it and everything. All the things around me mean something, something that I've earned for, something that I bought, something that was going to better help me in my future for some way. Yeah, and a lot of the things that I keep, I mean, maybe I do wonder if like there's another stereotype with ISFJs kind of almost being like hoarders a little bit, just because a lot of the things that they keep have some sentimental value. So like I can easily picture like an ISFJ hanging on to this very old robe And another person be like, why the hell do you have that? It takes so much room, it takes so much space, like it'd be so much better if you just threw it away. And the ISFJ can just say like, no, like, my best friend gave this to me when we were kids, and I had such a happy time with them. Like, we were laughing so much. We tried the robe on, and made us look silly, made them look silly, and like it has so much like meaning to me. So yeah, I can understand that. I have a lot of like things that would be probably considered junk, but have meaning to me. They have value. It's like, oh, I got this when I was younger, or I even found this, at the pool, and it looks so cool, and I refuse to throw it away because of what they mean. Um, I mean, how does it feel? Feels great, because I don't want to be surrounded by things that have no value to me. Yeah, even if I like have when I have like my own desk, like I try to like make it more homey, more of like my things. I'll have like something of mine, or I'll have like my favorite pen or pencil next to me or something like that. Try to, yeah, trying to put sentimental things around me, because being in a cold, hard desk without any kind of value just feels depressing to me. So, um, and how does it manifest toward my world? Um, a lot of the things that I have around me just kind of give me a lot of motivation to keep moving forward. Like the doll that I mentioned from one of my friends, like looking at that reminds me of my friendship with them and how much they support me and believe in me and how much they care about me, and it motivates me to do better. And then like another like doll that I have, it's like a little Pokemon doll that I have too. It just kind of reminds me of like the childhood side of me, of like, I loved Pokemon when I was a kid. I still kind of do now. And it just reminds me of a time of like when I was just with awe and wonder, and um, really liked being like a kid again. And so, yeah, all of these things just kind of give me nice, warm memories, things that make me happy. So, um, taking a look at them kind of motivates me and makes me want to move forward. Um, it's it's interesting too, because that can also come at in a negative way too. With one of my last relationships, there was a very huge sentimental thing that she gave me, and I felt super bad about it. I didn't want to get rid of it. I didn't want to throw it away, because I knew how much work and how much of her soul and heart she put into it. And I kept it for a really long time. I just felt terrible. I felt bad. And, despite that the relationship was over, like I felt bad. I didn't want to get rid of it. And something that I realized within that time that I kept it was that every time I kept looking at it, I started to feel worse. I felt bad. It reminded me of the times that I had with them, and reminded me of how things ended, and it reminded me of, maybe they're off having a better life and whatever. And I started realizing that over time, it just wasn't beneficial for me to have that. It was hurting me. It was impeding my progress. It was actually just making me feel worse every time I would look at it. So rather than just throw it away, the very least that I did was try to donate it. So I was able to donate it to maybe somebody else who might have a different feelings towards that. But yeah, the same way that sentimentality with things can be such a positive thing, it could also be a very negative thing if, I have that around me.
Absolutely. Here is one of the ways you can illustrate SI. If you look at the guy called Fred Rogers, I believe, there's a debate on whether or not he's an ISFJ or an INFP. Regardless, he still uses introverted sensing, SI. And something very notable about him is that he used to have puppets on his show. And so his producers or the people on the set would tell him, "We're going to get new puppets. These puppets are getting old. They're getting a little dirty." And he was like, "No, I want to use the original puppets that we used to film this, because it has sentimental value, some sort of hitting the SI with some sort of feeling function attached to it as well. And really feeling this need to preserve this thing that meant something to him, even if it was getting worn and torn." You'll see this with other SI users too. I know this ISTJ. She actually has a Bible that she never threw away. It's like super worn and torn, and it looks really tattered. And she's like, "No, I need to keep this Bible the way that it is, because it was my original Bible. There are so many memories attached to it." And so sometimes you'll see that type of behavior from some SI users, not all, but it's there. And so, what is the most out of character thing you did?
Oh, that is funny. The most out of character thing. Being so heavily influenced by other people. That is the easiest way to go about it for me. So most of my friends, in many ways, I'm so lucky to have them. They're most of them are intuitives. All of them, almost all of them are intuitive. So they, and the ones that my best friends that I have from them, INTP and ENFP. Those two are able to just bring out so many random things for me that I wouldn't have thought or expected. So I mean, I know that my experiences with them completely make me stop worrying and caring about uh, making sure that I look presentable or that I'm professional or making sure that I'm adhering to social norms and stuff. So if like a person, if my ENFP friend is being loud and obnoxious and we're all having a good time, I'm just going to be loud and obnoxious too. And I'll just say stupid things with them too and not care if other people are staring or anything like that, just because we're having a good time and it's just a funny thing. Um, it's so difficult to just pinpoint one thing that I've done out of character. Um, and there's so many fun experiences that I've had with my friends. With another group of friends, I mean, okay, this is the first thing that came to my mind, but um, with one group of friends, we were just out of the mall. Just it was late at night. We were just having fun, just walking around, and we saw like a random kind of like grocery cart just standing by there. And so just the randomest thing that we did was just play around with it. So one of us got on top of the car and we got pushed and we started just like going down the street and just having like a really random fun time with the freaking grocery cart. And and rather than caring about, oh no, there's police officers, or oh no, people can see us, or people can say something or whatever, I just didn't care, and I was just having a good time with them, and even doing things that might not necessarily be the most positive thing, but yeah. And there's so many experiences like that, so it's really difficult to pinpoint just one thing that was out of character. But I know that the things that I've done out of character is easily related to who I'm surrounded with, to the friends that I have, what they're doing, what they're planning to do, or whatever. And yeah.
Yeah. It's sometimes the friends are bringing out the goofy in you. It's almost like you have a friend who's maybe more on the EP side or someone who's chillax, and then they're like, hey, relax up. And then you have this goofy IJ coming out, going like, yeah, party. This is my after hour personality.
Yeah. Yep.
So, what is your ideal ordinary week?
Those two should not be together. Ideal and ordinary. Oh man. Uh if I really want an ordinary week, oh boy. Okay, well, I I guess making sure that it's a productive week, then making sure that I've been able to finish what I thought myself to finish on that day, or like the things that I wanted to do. So like like right now I'm in school, so like maybe making sure that I actually finish the homework assignment that I started, uh, getting my eat, sleep, uh, doing some swimming, uh, and yeah, making sure that I do my homework and reading. I guess that would be the ideal ordinary week. Not necessarily my ideal week, but yeah, I guess just making sure that I do what I planned to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's inspiring. Doing your homework. Jessica asks, how would you characterize FI in you? Are there any times
Hmm.
where you might prefer to use FI over FE?
Oof, 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 oof. It's really tough. I mean, someone would really have to do something that really just kind of goes against what I would consider right and wrong. So I mean, yeah, If one of my friends or someone that I care about was talking about something serious about yeah, about something, whether it be like, I mean, this is the extreme kind of thing, like if they're planning on killing somebody or killing themselves, or even taking a stance against something that I really, really don't agree with, then yeah, then I might have to just say something about it and just say no, forget forget social forget social harmony, forget like trying to make everybody feel good, like no, this is wrong, like this is absolutely terrible, this is not right. Where then I'll have to speak out and say something. um yeah, I mean, the only time that I might use FI over FE is just if someone says something that I really don't agree with, and it's absolutely worth speaking out, even if I get myself embarrassed in the process or looked down upon, just at least to be able to say something for the betterment of society or for whoever else was in that kind of interaction. Being able to speak up or at least say that, hey, this is wrong.
Yeah. Interesting. One of the ways where I use FI is I'll have my FP friends, say for example, like an ENFP, telling me that I should use my FI more. So it's almost like sometimes I'll say things that sound too FE and it'll piss people off just because they're like, be more genuine. And I'm like, all right, I didn't know I was not being that way. But it's
Mm.
kind of like forcing you to be even more FI. So I think over time, if you hang around enough FPs, they'll kind of call you up. They'll call you out when you're not being FI, and you'll learn to develop it in certain ways. And I think, in a certain extent, by being an introvert, you're attached to your personal view in some way. So you're aware of what your personal view of a situation is, regardless
Mm-hmm.
of whether or not you're using FI.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
sometimes the FI might come up when there's something just so wrong, so explicitly morally wrong about a situation where you're like, all right, this is too much.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. How can I make ISFJs or you laugh uncontrollably?
Wow. Oh man, that's so funny because one of my friends, or my ESTJ friend in particular, he's he's been, for whatever reason, really onto this kind of quest of like finding some kind of like video that's gonna make me laugh, and he has been a little bit unsuccessful on it. But man, how to make ISFJs in general laugh? I mean, I think I wouldn't know how to put it, but yeah, like if you're able to kind of, at least at the very least, kind of understand a little bit of what their particular likes are, what their particular, what you're gonna have to just observe what they are laughing at. If you notice that they're laughing at dark humor, right, then self-deprecating jokes are definitely going to be the way to go for some ISFJs. Other ISFJs are different and they don't appreciate, those kind of dark humor or self-deprecating jokes. And if, like, for one ISFJ, if you say something like with dark humor, they're going to be like, oh wow, like that's so offensive, I can't believe you said that. Or if you go with self-deprecating, some ISFJs might be like, oh my gosh, no, you're the best, no, 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 don't think that way, no, like you're the best person, you're so great, blah blah blah, and they won't let you be that way. um yeah, I think that it just takes a little of research on the other person's part, just to see like what is it that actually does make them laugh. But because yeah, every ISFJ is going to be different when it comes to humor. Some ISFJs that I've met or online that's like love the dark humor. They find it super funny. They love the self-deprecating kind of humor, like, oh yeah, I'm the worst person on the planet. Well, yeah, so am I. Like we're just horrible people. Yeah, we just hate everybody. Like, screw people. Like, I don't, like, we're supposed to care about people. Like, nah, screw people. Or just make each other laugh that way. But um for me personally, I think the things that make me laugh really uncontrollably are things that I just completely do not expect. And the funny part about it, that I think the person that can just do that is my INTP friend. He is able to just come up with scenarios, come up with things, or just do things that's so completely and totally random. outside of my own expectations that I can't help but laugh. I cannot help but like just be in complete and utter disbelief of like whatever thing that just happened. But yeah, my INTP friend is able to do that very easily of just going outside of my realm of expectations. But maybe for other ISFJs that might work too. I just know for me, something that would make me laugh uncontrollably is just something that I don't expect, something completely and totally random. You know what? Now that I think about it, all right, just something totally random that I wouldn't expect is if that same INTP friend literally drove by my house right now, put on a whole friggin' jester costume and started dancing and like doing some kind of dance routine or number. That would make me just be so shocked, disbelief, and definitely would make me laugh. I think that would be actually a perfect thing. But if he ever sees this, now he knows, so he's not going to do this. He's going to try some other crazier version of what I just said. But yeah, at least that's my answer on that.
You need to record a video if that ever happens.
I hope so.
They call it a comedy technique. They call it the bait and switch. You kind of bait someone and then you tell them something very unexpected as the third thing. And then it induces laughter.
Mm-hmm.
So what is one or two or more of the main realizations you had after learning about your cognitive function stack and how it flowed and processed information?
I mean, I think the wonderful thing about everything was that prior to MBTI, I just felt alone. I felt very heavily misunderstood by other people. And I think learning about the cognitive function stack, how I process information, just gave me such a beautiful way of being able to tell that to other people. Like, hey, you know, it looks like I care about the past. So everything that happens in the past, you know, I'll be able to remember it. And, you know, I care about, you know, making sure that we're all doing good. So if one of you guys are not doing good, you know, I'm going to pick up on it and we're not going to have a good time. And if you guys are obnoxious and rude and loud, I'm not going to like that. I'm going to put my foot down and say something about it. I think, yeah, one of the main realizations is just that I wasn't alone. The other thing was that I can finally tell people how they can better understand me. And how I function, how I work, and they can take with that information how they want. And what else? Cognitive function stack, float, and process information. I think, yeah. I think the other big thing was just that I finally have an awesome way of being able to conceptualize how my train of thought works. Like great. I love going to the past. I love kind of recounting everything from the past standpoint and just kind of moving on from there. Like, great. So I know I'll do that. So I know I can watch out for that and notice when I'm doing that. Yeah. So I think those kind of things were really nice to realize at that moment. And yeah.
Yeah. It puts language to the phenomenon of your day-to-day life. It's like, wow, there's a way to actually capture this.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing. Which types are most likely to get furious over tiny, petty stuff?
Well, you know, I think even with that kind of question, that can apply to any type really, because it all depends on perspective. So, I mean, I guess since we're here on an ISFJ panel here, we can get furious over the tiniest petty stuff as well, because generally speaking, we're non-confrontational. So if we already notice something early on that we don't like, and it keeps happening over and over, and we say nothing about it, and then finally there comes to that one little straw that one thing that just completely tips us over, then we're going to get really upset over something small and tiny and something that, like, to the other person, they're like, what the heck? Like, why are you so bothered by this? So, like, I mean, a small example could be like maybe the way that a person chews food. Like, let's say that an ISFJ is dating, you know, whatever type, and they realize that the way that they chew food is very loud and very annoying and obnoxious. And obviously, to be nice and non-confrontational, the ISFJ says nothing. Time goes on. Maybe they get in a relationship, and time goes on. And then finally, you know, ISFJ had a really tough day. They're really going through a lot of stuff. and they go out to eat, and then finally the ISFJ will just explode and be like, have you ever eaten in a quiet way? Like, have you ever just eaten something and not like, just chew with your loud mouth or whatever? And they're going to be like, what the heck? Where did this even come from? But we can, easily get upset over possibly tiny petty stuff if we don't make a mention of it early on. And to the other person, it's going to look like it's a tiny petty thing, but to us, it's something that we've possibly just haven't mentioned since the beginning, that unfortunately allowed for it to get to a worse situation.
Yeah. There's a phrase for dish piling or sink dishes. It's almost like this, you have so many dirty sink dishes that when it gets to a certain point, it overflows and then everything breaks. And so typically, like, when people get mad over petty stuff, it's not about that petty thing. It's about like the little things that reminds them of. That's just the straw that breaks the camel's back, the tipping point.
Mm-hmm.
And so all you see is kind of that moment when it could actually be something bigger. And so what is your experience with TI? How do you view TI?
Darn. The one function that is difficult for me. Like I mentioned earlier, I mean, I think the way that I experience TI has just been greatly, at least from what I'm aware of, has been when it's engaged with SI. So when I'm in the grip, when I'm just stuck in the loop of SI and TI, just completely super over analyzing the past, thinking about what could I possibly done different or whatever, or what could I have done, or something like that. But I guess what I'm really lucky for in that is that my sister is an ISTP, so I'm able to kind of see a little bit from her, like how she does TI, how she engages in TI on a daily basis. But from my understanding, from what I see, is that it's just so internal. It's so internal, and so it's very difficult for me to even still observe and see what she goes through, because everything that happens is just categorized, put into her head. She overthinks everything, or like, to me, it's overthinking. Maybe to her, it's like something that's would be considered normal, and over analyzing everything. So to me, I kind of just see more as like the function that I use just to understand things, organize things in my head, categorize things in my head, and yeah.
Cool. And what is the process you use to determine the priorities for the day for your life?
Man, it's a funny it's a funny thing for that, because that's something that I'm kind of struggling with personally, at least, of like trying to prioritize like what I should be doing for the day, because I have a million things I could do. But right, how do you just kind of narrow it down to the most important things that you have to do? That is something that is difficult for me, because I know what I have to do in terms of what order and everything. That becomes a difficult part. But for what I do in a day, I try to go chronological on it. So like, I guess for me, because I'm a student, if I know that I have a homework assignment that's due on Monday, those are the ones that I'm going to be doing first. It doesn't matter how hard or how easy they are. That's what I'm just going to do first. So I guess that's kind of a good example of now, because I do have homework assignments due on Monday, but I have a really big assignment to finish up on Wednesday. So knowing that, I still want to get the assignments that are done Monday, because that comes first. I might still have time to work on that big assignment on Wednesday, on Tuesday, and part of Wednesday. So that will be the last thing that I'll try to do. And in general, outside of school, generally, I already have a pretty good idea throughout the week of what needs to be done. So like, if I notice that something, if like I'm missing something, if I'm starting to get low on ham, I'm starting to get low on like milk or something like that, I will, make the effort to actually do that before it gets to that point. And what other things other than that? When it comes to priorities, and maybe like with social relationships with like friends and relationships, I mean, if I find myself having the time, just even a quick message or even just calling them just to check up on them and see how they're doing, I feel like I have my own kind of internal clock of that. Like, you know what? It's been a very long time since I haven't heard from this person. Wonder how they're doing. So I'll try to make time to talk to them. I don't think I'll let too much time pass before I start talking to somebody. So I'll actually make more of an effort to then kind of make sure that I'm keeping track with all of my friends and everything. Um, yeah, and for life, on the more general aspect of that, I try to make sure that I am prioritizing on things that I want for myself. So what is it that I'm focused on getting in the future? So for me, I start thinking about my goals. Like, what do I envision myself in the future? What do I see myself doing in the future? And once I'm able to kind of grasp what it is that I want in my future, being able to see it and being able to replay that over and over in my head, that this is what I will be, this is how I will be, is the next step after that is what do I have to do in order to get those things? And just kind of slowly trickle down from there. I want to have the clear picture of the future in my head. Once that's there, taking it down little by little. Okay, how do I get there? 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 So making sure that whatever it is that I have my goal in life, work towards it. The things that I do should be things that are pertained to that goal, pertain to what I want in my future. So I think prioritizing things in that way is making sure, like, what are things that I can do, what is within my control, and what are things that are outside of my control. Because obviously some things I won't have control over. Like if, for example, like if I wanted to buy myself a house, obviously I can't really start looking at the market now. That's kind of pointless because I don't know how many more years it'll take for me until I can actually finally find a home. So that's something that can be waited for later. Um, and things that I can work on now is making sure that I have good grades in my class and making sure that I can pass. That's something important, and that's something that I can definitely do now. So that's what I prioritize. So maybe in life it's a little bit easier. During the day, I feel very overwhelmed by how many things that there is to do, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice. It's like, how do you eat a pile of cheese, one cheese bite at a time? So break it down into manageable chunks. Good advice.
Yes.
They call it chunking. So,
Ah,
how
yeah.
do you relate to ISTPs?
Awesome. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, my sister is an ISTP. Um, yeah, so a lot of the same kind of generalizations with ISTPs, very like kind of lone wolfy, more to themselves a little bit, and very sensation seeking. But I think my only experience with ISTP has actually been my sister. So it's a little bit difficult to compare that with other ISTPs. The only ones that I've actually met more have been ESTPs. ESTPs I've known a little bit more. I've known a few more ESTPs. ISTPs not so much. So, but at least with my sister, we get along very well. But I feel like that getting along just kind of goes a little bit outside of MBTI a little bit, and just kind of more into our culture, our traditions, and how we grew up together and everything. But in terms of personality types, I mean, we're both introverts, keep to ourselves. Like, you got your own things, I got my own things. There's a big, good, nice respect on that. And when it comes to having fun, we both have fun. She wants to go do something, I can tag along and it'll be a fun time, or, you know, things like that. And if there's something that is happening that might not be such a good idea for her, I can just kind of help her out with that, giving her a different kind of pair of fresh eyes of like, well, I know you're thinking about it in this way, but have you maybe considered this way? Or like, have you ever considered maybe the possibility of something else instead? Which then might help her make better informed decision afterwards. But yeah, unfortunately, I haven't had much experiences with other ISTPs aside from my sister, but we get along really great. We respect each other, and yeah.
Cool, cool beans. And so, has your relationship interaction ever surprised you after learning about personality type? How is getting along with or not getting along with a certain type? Or has the discovery made a lot of sense?
Oh yeah. So because I've learned this in high school, like yeah, I've tried to have like my exes before, like kind of know a little bit about MBTI and try to learn more about them. So obviously, way in the beginning, I don't think I try to learn their time right from the get go. I was just more concerned about learning more about them and seeing who they were. And once we were on a level of trust, then I introduced MBTI and just out of pure curiosity and see. Um, there have been some relationships where I was kind of surprised because judging by how they were and how they acted, I thought a certain way. Like I thought, oh, then maybe they're another ISFJ, or oh, they're maybe like an INFP or something. And then when we figure out what their type is, then yeah, I kind of get surprised, like, oh shoot, like there's something else that I just didn't pick up on. Um, but let's see, not getting along with a certain type. I mean, when it comes to relationships and kind of like what I was saying earlier, like at least for me personally, I truly believe that any type can be with any type. It's just a matter of, are you willing to put up with those strengths and weaknesses yourself? You know, are you willing to, as an INTJ, be willing to put up with the emotional need that an ISFJ has? And for an ISFJ, are you willing to put up with emotional distance a little bit? Are you willing to put up with kind of cold calculations that might not align with your kind of train of thought sometimes, right? Are you okay with those kind of things? Um, and yeah, I mean, I once I learned about my ex's personality type, it just helped me understand them a little bit better. So I was able to understand their train of thought more. I was able to kind of do and say things that was a little bit like better for them. So like I think like with an ISFP, I knew that okay, well, you know, make sure that I don't say anything that's going to potentially trigger them and just kind of keep things chill and light and fun and just, you know, having a good time. And with somebody that I dated before, she was an ESFP. So I already knew from there, like, well, she's going to love going out. She's going to love, you know, going out to places and trying out new things. So that's exactly what I had myself do, of like trying to surprise her, go on dates and like try to have us go to like different places that she hasn't been to before, things that she enjoys doing. Um, so I've definitely used MBTI to kind of better inform how I can make my relationship with that person better.
Yeah, that's amazing. I also believe that any type can be with any type. There are trends for sure, but I would say it's really about, can you handle the gifts of certain combinations, and are you able to handle the more common pitfalls with certain combinations? If you can, then it's a good fit. If you can't, then maybe not, like what Roger says so eloquently. So Joyce, are you trying to catch something in the air? See, like my camera just loses focus on my face. It forgets that I'm here. And so I start to look like an impressionistic painting. And I'm like, no, stop it. I'm abstractifying. And so that's my desperate attempt to not become a blob. How has your relationship with TI changed over time? You're currently in school. How do you find you rely more or less on TI now than you did in elementary or high school?
Yeah, definitely. TI, I didn't really give much of a thought before, and then right once I started learning about MBTI and realizing that part of me, yeah, I tried to embrace it a little bit more. I tried to accept it a bit more, and just yeah, I especially with school for sure. Now more than ever, I have to rely on it more. But I think in the past, there wasn't so much of a need to engage in TI. Like, yes, with school and assignments and stuff, but when you're younger, you just have it's a time of interacting with other people, with other kids, with other individuals that are different. So you're engaging in different, or for me, I was engaged in different functions at the time, thinking more about like, how can I relate with someone else? How can I be friends with somebody else? And yeah, unfortunately things have changed so much now with the current state of which we're in. So with my school right now, it's all remote. So it is difficult that I am not able to use that FE to kind of relate to my peers and talk to them and socialize with them. It's all just been virtual. So yeah, definitely now more than ever, I've had to use on TI and just focus on on homework assignments and reading.
Cool beans. And so, what are your personal thoughts on Jung's individuation process? Are you in pursuit of it personally? So, what Jung's individuation process is basically using your less preferred sides more. So, whatever you're bad at, getting better at that so you're more of a balanced human being rather than imbalanced. What is your experience with that?
This is going to sound so silly, but I think it does kind of pertain to how I feel about it. There is a specific video game that I used to play as a kid. It was Donkey Kong Country 2, I think. So it's like when you're not playing as Donkey Kong, you're playing as like Diddy Kong and Dixie Kong, and you're trying to rescue Donkey Kong. So there is a little mini game in there where you have to control an ostrich and make it to the finish line. So me in the beginning, I used to think, okay, so these ostriches have like different skills, and as you continue beating the game and beating levels, you find these different like points that you can add onto your ostrich. So what I used to do all the time was like, okay, let's make logical sense. So let me increase the speed, then let me increase the flight, let me increase the jump, and then let me increase the some other aspect that I already forgot. So what I would do is one by one, I would try to make everything the same, everything balanced. And you know what ended up happening? I kept losing. I kept losing every single time. I was so upset. Like I couldn't understand what I was doing wrong. It's like, this is perfect. Like I'm putting everything balanced and I'm getting so much of this. What am I doing wrong? And so finally, once I started trying to do something differently, I was like, you know what? Let me just put like most of my points into just speed, most of my points into just jumping. Let's just see what happens. So I'll have like no skills on flight and no skills on some other aspect. And I won. And then I kept winning. And then I kept getting better. And then I kept winning. And so I was like, wow. So if I just would have kept at my strengths, then I was able to win and do all of that. So I know that it's funny in the context of a video game, but I feel that it does similarly apply to how I view it as well. There is, yes, because I guess even in the game too, that's so funny. You don't want to just have 0 on something. You still want to have like a little flight, a little jump, a little boost still, but you're not going to put so much importance of it in contrast to like all of your other strengths. I mean, the strengths that you have, definitely work on them because that's who you are. That's what you're going to flourish on. For me, it's not to say that I don't ever want to engage in all, like my negative functions as well either. Like working on those two is part of just growing up and maturing. But at least for me personally, I think that it's a little bit better to just continue working on your strengths. Once you feel that you have worked at your strengths, once you feel that you're at least at an adequate level where you've worked at your strengths pretty well, right, then you have room to grow. You have room to also work on your other aspects of yourself. But personally, and honestly, I think everybody would agree that like when it comes to life, you're never at a point where like, all right, that's it. I'm good on FE. I'm good on like socialization. I have nothing more to learn. I'm done. That's it. Let's move on to something else now. Like there's always something to learn. There's always something that is going to come completely unexpected that you wouldn't have thought about. That's just going to be another room for improvement and room to grow. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I really do think there's that, yeah, you can work on all of your strengths and weaknesses, but when it comes to your strengths, just keep working on those too, because those are who you are. And the moment you let go of your strengths, you're going to find yourself you're not going to find yourself being genuine to who you are, and you're not going to feel very comfortable. I think that with even on a personal level, for another experience of mine, talking with an INTJ a lot just kind of made me feel like a little bit worse, because I started obviously being FE. I want to understand. I want to be more like them. And then I started realizing that the things that I was coming in conclusion to wasn't aligning to what I really thought about. And I wasn't liking that part of myself. I wasn't feeling good about it. I wasn't feeling happy. And it wasn't until I started realizing like, well, maybe I should focus more on what I actually like. And despite what everybody else says, that I then felt a little bit more whole and felt okay.
Yeah. Your story is kind of like, don't fear the man who has tried 10,000 kicks one time, but fear the man who has tried one kick 10,000 times. And so it's basically like specialize. You will get more bang from your buck from specializing in a certain area rather than spreading your attention to a million things. And that's good advice because there are a lot of concepts that make sense with that. There's a concept Angela Duckworth talks about called grit, persistence, putting your all into something, and actually becoming better at those few select areas are proven to make people into mad geniuses in whatever they pursue. It's like if Albert Einstein also tried gymnastics and tried to become an Olympic gymnastic person, he wouldn't have been able to do what he did because he did what he did because he specialized. And
Yeah.
so good advice, Roger. How do you determine needing time alone or social life as an ISFJ?
How do you determine needing alone time in social life? I think, yeah, it takes time to kind of like understand what is kind of needed, but I kind of start catching it myself. And shout outs to Ashley, by the way, because she is my ENFP friend that I kept on talking about. So that's awesome and funny. And I'm glad that you're watching this. I really do think that what I start realizing that once I'm hanging out too much with other people, once there's just too much of an overstimulation on that, I start realizing within myself, like, no, I need to get away. I need to leave. Like, I need to just be by myself and recharge a little bit. So I think I just start realizing just that I feel drained. If I'm with too many people and that happens too consistently, I feel it within myself. I feel drained. I feel like my batteries run out and I need to be by myself. On the contrast, though, because I have that little tiny annoying FE, which is so funny, is that I also realize when I'm too stuck being by myself, if I like go a whole week just literally not going out of the house, I feel the effects of that. I feel like, damn, like I have not talked to anybody. I haven't hung out. I haven't even driven in a while. What's a car? And like, and then I started being like, wow, what is even food? What is even like hanging out or walking? And it just feels really bizarre for me. So I realize it's a very funny, annoying balance that I have to consider for me personally. I'm not sure for other ISFJs, but yeah, if I'm too much by myself, it's not good. If I'm too much hanging out with other people, it's not good either. So I think the way to determine that for me is just really looking and observing what I'm feeling behaviorally. Like, do I feel tired? Do I feel like I have a headache? Or do I feel restless? Do I feel like, oh, like I got nothing to do, and like, I'm just kind of looking around and seeing like what else can I do? Just observe, just noticing the things that I'm doing. Yeah, kind of helped me determine that.
Well said, Roger. And so thank you so much for coming out. You make an excellent admin to ISFJ Haven, and the group is much well off having you there to make sure your FE keeping everyone in harmony, that no one is biting each other's head off, and if they are, you're able to bring out your TI and go like, wata, no. And so you keep the group safe, and that is wondrous. And if you guys want to check out ISFJ Haven, it will be linked below. And thank you so much, Roger, for your insights into your type. It's clear you're a very compassionate person with a big heart, and that you're able to keep the peace and mediate situations. And so when people are being very riled up, you're able to step back a little bit and take a little caution before jumping into a situation so you don't make the conflict worse than what it already was. So rarely do you ever contribute to a situation to make it worse. You're pretty good at putting out fires. For all of the fires in the building, you're the fireman with the hose going like shh. You're putting out all the social fires, making sure people get along, and that their relationships live for another day with your excellent FE conflict management skills. And your SI is able to respect the past and take all the gold nuggets from it and learn from it in such a way where you don't repeat mistakes. Once you make a mistake, you really try to figure out the best way to not make that mistake again. And it's amazing. And everyone really enjoyed it. So you left people off better than when they were today. And I thank you everyone for asking grand spanking awesome questions. And thanks, Roger, for being a kind presence in this world when we need more of that energy around us.
Yeah,
And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you all in the next episode. And thank you from the audience members as well.